Good afternoon and welcome to the session on innovative financing to scale up community-led solutions. Our session is a collaborative effort between three different organizations. We will be presenting solutions in response to declining funding and changing political, financial, and cultural contexts in our countries and sectors. Before we start, I'd like to introduce the team that put this session together. Saba Kawaja, hi, is the Regional Director of the Terwilliger Center for Innovation and Shelter, Southeast Asia, for Habitat for Humanity. She leads strategy and expansion across the Philippines, Cambodia, and Indonesia. Her work advances financial inclusion and affordable housing, including green, disaster-resilient solutions for owner-driven construction. She's held roles in housing finance systems, innovation awards, and public-private partnerships. Originally from Pakistan, she's lived in Manila for 13 years and holds an MBA from the Lahore University of Management Sciences and has prior banking experience. So welcome, Saba. Mary Ann. Mary Ann Rimbao, a distinguished feminist and Indigenous activist of Melanesian roots, is the founder and executive director of the Humanity and Nature Indigenous Women's Association, Inc., or HANIWAI. With a background in international civil and humanitarian law, she champions Indigenous lands rights, climate and environmental justice, and gender equality in Papua New Guinea and Oceania. A recognized leader on the global stage, she represented Indigenous perspectives at COP29 and COP30 and the Regional Forum on Business and Human Rights Australia and New Zealand. Her expertise is in forced displacement and peace building and advocating for marginalized communities to ensure their voices influence critical policy discussion worldwide. Delivering ADB's response is a person all of us here know. But for those joining us online, Heidi Ir Dupuy is the head of the NGO and Civil Society Center at the ADB. The NGOC leads the bank's engagement with civil society organizations. Through its institution-wide network, the NGOC facilitates institutional coordination and provides technical support to mainstream citizen engagement, CSO engagement, and collaboration for development effectiveness. Before joining ADB, Heidi worked with the World Vision Cambodia as Director of Policy, Advocacy, and Communications. In this capacity, she worked on child protection, combating child labor, addressing anti-human trafficking, ensuring food security, and promoting good governance practices. Finally, I'm Pinky Medina, the Executive Director of Venture for Fundraising. We're a nonprofit intermediary organization based in the Philippines. Our mission is to influence and enable people and organizations to share their resources and improve their communities. Through our capacity building and technical assistant interventions, we work to influence the givers, corporations, corporate foundations, mainly through their CSR programs. Also with institutional partners, individual givers, and groups. We influence them to give more deliberately so they can achieve their social objectives. And we enable the askers, nonprofit organizations, to be more systematic and effective in raising resources by accessing the three sources of nonprofit funds. These are grants, gifts and contributions, and earned income. And eventually, and ultimately to achieve their missions. I've been a fundraising professional for 30 years, and my specialization is in individual giving and capital campaigns. I bring the learning and insights on the organizational development and sustainability solutions that we have partnered with our over 1,300 partners in across the globe, no? Who are working in various sectors. Specific to Asia, aside from the Philippines, where we do most of our work, we have run programs for CSOs and regional networks in Cambodia, Indonesia, Thailand, and Georgia. Well, with the introductions out of the way, shall we start? We begin by introducing a principle that we promote in our work, no, which will be validated by the solutions that will be presented today. The best indicator of the value of an organization is when the community supports it. No? When they find the work of the organization important, then they will support it in any way they can. No? At Venture, we anchor our work on research and the analysis of philanthropic data and share this with our partners to inform their resource generation decisions. I'd like to establish the context for our session by quickly sharing the latest data on the funding landscape we are all operating in. So this is our new normal. No? The global funding crisis. We all know, and been experiencing it for more than a decade now, that institutional funding and ODA has been decreasing across the globe. The latest data shows that for the first time in 30 years, the big four, that's US, Germany, UK, and France, in 2024 and 2025. And this amounts to about close to 96% of the total ODA decline. Then Western bilateral aid is expected to decline by 20% as funds are diverted to defense spending and domestic immigration. And this amounts to about 2.7 trillion US dollars globally in 2024. And total official development finance to Southeast Asia is projected to fall by 2 billion this year. So traditional grant-reliant models for health, education, and civil society organizations are the most vulnerable in this new landscape. However, we believe that in every crisis is an opportunity. With the decline in Western funding, we found a way to bridge resource gaps by harnessing the power of local giving. Just to illustrate, one of the sources on the data on individual giving that we monitor is the World Giving Report. It's a comprehensive global study by the Charities Aid Foundation that measures and explores attitudes towards giving in about 101 countries. In 2024, Asia ranked second for the proportion of people who donated money by continent, with Africa ranking first. In Asia, 44% of respondents gave funds to a CSO, followed by 42% who gave directly to a person or a family in need, and the rest to religious organizations. We've found that Asians donate a higher income percentage than North Americans or Europeans. And Indonesia is the most generous nation for 7 years, with 90% giving regularly. Before Indonesia, Myanmar was the top giver for 5 consecutive years. And giving historically increases during crisis to support critical causes. We saw this during the economic crisis, as well as COVID, no, and during disasters. So giving is culturally rooted. It's tied very directly toward the donor's home community. And funding focuses on education, advancement of women and girls, nutrition, and poverty relief. No? And then there's this group of next generation fund givers. No, these are the younger, the second generation in Asia who are most likely, no, to inherit, no, the um, businesses of their families, no, and that's another market that we see for engagement and hopefully for support. So Southeast Asia naman. Let's look at Southeast Asia. Singapore jumped 19 places, no, on the World Giving Index, no, to the third globally. And why? Because there's government matching and tax incentives. No? Um, we understand that uh, the there was a philanthropy tax incentive scheme for family businesses was created in 2023, which allowed the deduction, the tax deduction of about 100% for overseas donations, so cross-border donations. No? But there's a limit to 40% of the donor's income. Nonetheless, it's amazing how some governments are very supportive, no, of giving. No. Then China, this is another point we wanted to make. No? Online platforms raised over 1.55 billion in a single year in China. And this is another message to NGOs, no, or CSOs, that we have to make giving easy for our individual givers. And of course, across the ADB region, giving is deeply rooted in religion and cultural values. Okay? So now, we go now into the Filipino giver. The Philippines is the 24th most charitable country. 75% of Filipinos donated in 2024. However, they gave directly, no, to people in need and not over formal charities or formal organizations. No? We've been encouraging our Philippine partners that there's an opportunity to redirect this informal giving to institutional, community-led solutions that can be scaled. So individual giving is booming in Asia. So that's another possible solutions for some civil society organizations who are quite grant reliant. So just to quickly share, no, an example of how local giving is manifested in the Philippines. There was a movement called the 10 million trees in 10 years for a greener Negros Island. This movement was led or catalyzed by the Energy Development Corporation. No? It's the largest renewable energy company, which operates geothermal, wind, hydro, and solar facilities across the Philippines. No? Our organization, Venture, was engaged to provide project management assistance for their CSR program on Negros Island. No? There's an active volcano on Negros Island, and the company operates a geothermal plant there. No? The Negros Island was heavily affected by deforestation due to agricultural expansion, specifically, no, for sugar plantations. The island is known as the sugar bowl of the Philippines, and pretty much most of the land was, most of the trees were cut down to make way for sugar plantations. No? There's illegal logging also, fuel wood collection, no? And slash and burn farming. Poverty was rampant. People moved up to the mountains in search of arable lands. So this deforestation led to a decline in biodiversity, water scarcity, warmer weather, and flooding and landslides during the rainy season. When the project started, only 16% of the original forest cover remained on the island. So the motivation to lead the project for the company was an obvious business decision to renew the watersheds and sustain their geothermal wells. But for the government and community, it was also to address the impact of deforestation on the community, on people's lives. So just as an illustration, we had to structure the whole project on a framework, no? And we adopted the collective impact framework, no? Where all the actors, no, had shared the agenda or the mission of the project. No? We had shared measurement systems that were developed by the scientists and experts, no, who were also partners in the project. We had activities where people could share their best practices and find solutions together. No? And for our organization, manage the communication, resource mobilization, as well as partner management, which is very important as the backbone of the project. No? So um, the goal, no, was clear, but what we were happy to share is that the 10 million trees, and the goal was to plant native endemic species from reef to ridge, no, within the island. Okay, we hit the 10 million mark in only 6 years, and but I think what was more important was we were able to engage 268 different partners to participate, no, in the project. And these included, of course, government and of business and private sector, but we also had schools, faith-based organizations, social civic organizations, even the chambers of commerce came on board, no, to all do their part in making the dream a reality. And each entity shared their resources, no, whether they were human, even the students were planting, no. The corporations, of course, were sponsoring many of the activities. The landowners, no, were sharing a portion of their sugar lands for forest breaks, for fire breaks, no, and different, and this was like, it was amazing how so many entities came together, no, to achieve the goal. So our conclusion, therefore, is that when people own the project, when they participate in the project, so much can be done that that even government-led programs might not even achieve. No? So at this point, I'm going to turn over our there. I'll turn over the floor to Mary Ann, who will share her experience in Papua New Guinea. Mary Ann.
Um, Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. As an Indigenous person, I acknowledge the Indigenous of this land and every Indigenous people seated in this room today. Thank you, everyone. My name is Miriam Rimbau, as introduced earlier. I'm an Indigenous activist. Sorry, it's a bit. I'm not into finance. I'm in the civic space, but what I want to share with every one of you today is how we use our Indigenous knowledge to mobilize communities and preserve and conserve finances that are run and then that are raised through integrated farming, fisheries, poultry, and small-scale agriculture in the rural areas. So, as we all know, small island developing nations are greatly affected by climate change, and it has caused urban migration and urban shift, and people in rural areas are greatly affected by climate change. For that reason, and the context with the problem we have in small island developing nations, we face overlap in climate change challenges, urban migration, excluding from finances, and indigenous urban settlements. Most of the time, youth and women-led organizations are underfunded and left at the brink of poverty. We face clean water sanitation issues during urban drift, and those are the challenges we face in rural areas when we drift into urban areas. So we use our Indigenous knowledge because we are culturally grounded. We use our Indigenous knowledge to gather local communities, and then we mobilize into preserving finances, especially for our civic space. We are always underfunded. Being a Melanesian woman, it's very challenging to be the voice, to advocate for, to be representative of other vulnerable communities. So most of the time we have funding gaps. We are underfunded. In that reason, there's poverty, there's issues with clean water sanitation, and gender imbalance in society. For those reasons, we try to find solutions and how they were formed by integrated farming, bringing up youth-led enterprises and climate-smart agriculture, and renewable energy. We also partner with PNG Weather Services to help us because of the effects of climate change. Prior, in the traditional days, we can tell there's rain and there's dry season and there's seasons for fish, seasons for hunting. But due to climate change, it's been impacted badly on especially in small island nations. That's why we rely on weather services to at least help us with forecast of weather so that we can do planting and harvesting on right time, and then we can set aside finances to sustain us when there is no fundings, and then there is no help from the government. That's where we, civil society at the front level, on the ground level, do our work in our little ways in our communities to help keep the people going and to meet some of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. So, next slide, please. So, as a result, we see that we have strengthened food security, and then we have income generating avenues for indigenous urban settlers, and through resilience, through traditional and modern tools. And this innovation have integrated food security, generated income, and built resilience. They are reproducible and scalable across the Asia Pacific. So what I want to bring to this floor and to ADB is as an Indigenous knowledge holder, we have the power and the capacity to preserve food and preserve food in due season. And we can adapt that strategy, that mechanism into preserving finance and using in the long run when there is no funding and there is funding gap to keep us going in vulnerable contexts during conflicts, during climate-induced displacement, and during crises that we face. So if we are doing things with the best of our ability in small ways, ADB has to look direct into women-led organizations or youth-led organizations, especially CSOs on the ground who are working with communities in rural areas and urban informal settlement settings, so that ADB can assist us by funding and financing local-led projects which can help in sustainability and meeting this ADB Strategy 2030 and Sustainable Development Goals. That is all I had to say, because I'm not a finance sort of person. I advocate, I sell my voice, my words to the world to see what kind of situation we have in Indigenous communities, especially in a male-dominated Melanesian society, where I don't have a space in places like this to talk and to raise my voice for myself and for other young and other beautiful Papua New Guinea women who are silenced through generation. So in line with ADB Strategy 2030, poverty reduction and inclusion is paramount. And then climate resilience in small island developed nations. We face the effects of climate change on a daily basis, and gender equality and youth leadership is paramount, especially in this framework where we can be collaborative and partnership with ADB as we move forward from here onwards, not only for us, but for the generations to come. Because as an Indigenous person, we do reforestation, we do believe in the future, we do preserve food so that we can use in the due season where there's no food and where there's the children's coming up in the future so that they can use what we preserve. So in that same mentality, same scale, we can use in this mechanism so that we help people during due time when they don't have enough, when there's finance gaps and funding gaps, so that we can continue to look after them. So my challenge here and my voice here to civil society is other civil societies in Asia Pacific is we need your partnership, we need your solidarity to be with us Indigenous small island developing seed nations, and as well as ADB to look into community-led and women-led organizations where we are culturally, limited and we don't have a space in society. So that's all I have to say for this afternoon, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Marianne. Indeed, the ones closest to the problem often have the clearest path to solutions. To present Habitat for Humanity's Asia Pacific's microbuild solution, let's welcome Saba on stage.
Thank you, Pinky. I think I can present starting from here. So thank you everyone for joining this session. I'm here to present, a flagship project of Habitat for Humanity. Oh, sorry. This is our flagship program, and at its heart are the low-income and informal income earners, vulnerable communities that are usually often locked out of formal banking financing channels, and they have no other recourse for getting funding to improve and repair their homes. So this is the statement of need that we have in our area. So 1 in 3 people globally live in inadequate housing. Inadequate housing is defined by structurally weak housing, overcrowded, or housing that is not equipped with basic services like food, like electricity and water supply, and at the same time is not equipped to deal with the climatic hazards like typhoons or earthquakes, which are now increasing especially in the Asia Pacific region. So what Habitat does is that we work towards supporting the most vulnerable and the low-income households and how they can upgrade their dwellings so that they can they can have a safe shelter, they can access their livelihoods, and they can provide a safe space for the children to grow and access education. So, like, the problem is that for the target market that we serve, housing is a process. It's not a purchase. Like for upper income people, they usually have savings, they have access to banking loans, they can go and they can take out a mortgage loan and access adequate housing in a locality, in a situation geographically, which is suitable for their needs. But for the target segment that we serve, it's a process. Often it takes them 8 to 10 years to build a decent house. They save a little and then they build a little. But there are 3 critical gaps there. One is affordability. They are not able to afford the right materials. Second is the lack of information. They do not know how to construct using resilient practices so that whatever investment they're making in their house, it is protected from climatic and other hazards such as fire or earthquake. And at the same time, they do not know how to select the right type of labor that would support resilient construction. And this is where, it's what we call in our area is that it's a wicked problem. It's not just a supply problem. It's a demand and a supply problem riddled with several systemic challenges. So the opportunity that came to us was that Habitat is initially an organization operating out of US. Currently, we are in 76 countries of the world. And back in 2010, the management gave us a very ambitious target of how we will change our approach from serving a few 100,000 of families each year to serving millions. And how is our solutions for affordable housing going to be replicable? And that's what led us to develop this solution for a microbuild fund. So basically, what the microbuild fund does is that matching the income, informality of the target segment that we are working with, we match that with the housing finance solutions from microfinance institutions. Compared to formal banking channels, their requirement for collateral and their tolerance for informality in land titles is much higher. And yes, it comes at a slightly higher cost, but these families do not have access to other venues for financing their housing needs. So this is our fund model. And we started this, it was a 13-year fund. Essentially, it is a blended finance instrument. And what we did was that we leveraged 10 million of concessional foundational funding, matched it with a 90 million of commercial financing from Development Finance Corporation, and lent that 100 million pool of financing as wholesale lending to microfinance institutions. This was paired with technical assistance that was provided to the microfinance institutions in how to adequately assess and distribute housing finance loans. And so what we did was that this was enable the financial institutions, microfinance institutions, to onward lend to low-income households for their home renovation needs. Now, what this instrument basically addresses is 3 things. One is that there was a perception that housing is when you talk about housing, you only think of mortgage loans. And there is a degree of risk involved. There is a degree of credit quality that is required before you can access those loans. At the same time, there is a need in the market which exists with the low-income households where they need to renovate smaller loans. They're not big-ticket item loans. It's not like a full new construction. They need to repair either a roof or a window or add another room. So those are smaller loans, and that is the requirement of the market, which the microfinance institutions are very capable of supplying. But at the same time, there was this perception that housing is considered high risk, and even the microfinance institutions were very reluctant to lend for housing purposes. So a study conducted in 2009-2010 showed that between 10 to 40% of all business loans provided by microfinance institutions across the globe, 10 to 40% are diverted towards housing, because it's a persistent need of low-income households. And because they have no other channel to fulfill this need, they continue to use their business loans or agricultural loans and funnel it towards improvements of their household structure. So based on that study was the idea of a dedicated housing loan that was created. And there were several perceptive barriers that we had to face in convincing microfinance institutions, because the biggest was that low-income households would not be able to repay these loans. And we piloted it in several countries. We allowed for a technical assistance as a risk mitigation factor. We also built in some letter of credits as a first loss guarantee to allow market confidence for financial institutions to invest in this product type. And what this enabled was that we created loans for various purposes, which was energy upgrades, construction loans, and also adaptation for thermal comfort. After 13 years, this is the impact of our microbuild fund. The fund was closed in October 2025. So out of the 100 million, we were cumulatively able to lend 230 million in loan renewals. We lent to 62 institutions in 33 countries across the globe, helping about 1.18 million individuals. And what it does is that 230 million that was lent over the period of 13 years, the financial institutions were able to compound it into a 1.2 billion lending for low-income households. And the result was that what we found out that the first perception that housing for low-income households is risky, it was proven to be untrue. Housing loan portfolio performed 3% better in repayment rates compared to the business loans. Why is that? If you look at it, it's actually a very simple thing. The low-income household, the most precious thing they own is their house. That is often the premises for their business as well, and the anchor for their children to study and have a family life. So they always prioritize repaying loans for housing. Secondly, we proved that housing lending to financial institutions for housing finance is actually a viable asset class. The repayment rates were phenomenal. All of this lending was done on market rates because we want this to be a sustainable solution. And out of the 62 investments, there was one investment that we had some difficulty, and that was also because that region was war prone. And normal banking and other financial activities were halted in that area. And we were able to restructure and recover the investment from that. So we won this award in 2023 based on how innovative, replicable, and scalable the solution was, because it provides access to financing to people who have no other means and is also addressing a real need in the market. So while, with the results of Microbuild Fund, we are able to tackle several problems in terms of that housing loan can actually be a sustainable solution and it's a viable asset class. Some systematic challenges still persist. And one of them is that financial institutions still do not have access to medium to long-term lines, which would enable them to continuously invest in housing loans. And that's a barrier that we are trying to address through our follow-on fund, the Microbuild 2 or the Microbuild Initiative. Now, in this fund, this will again be a blended finance facility but we are being very ambitious. We are growing the fund size by 5 times. We are aiming it to be a $500 million fund. And the innovative angle in this one is that we want to address not just the demand, but also the supply side of the equation, housing market equation. Here, we will also invest in small micro industries that are operating in the housing value chain, so that eventually the low-income households not only have access to financing, but they also have access to better materials and better trained labor, so that the end result is better housing quality, which is aligned to our mission. So a lot of the innovation and the new improvements that we are recommending in the follow-on fund are stemming from the evaluation for Microbuild 1, and which really highlighted that financing alone cannot solve the housing quality issue. And that's why we are investing in consumer literacy so that we can provide them accessible construction guides, and also in how to select the right material and the right labor to build the adequate resilience according to their geographies. So it's an aspirational fund. It is still being formalized. Our fund manager for this fund is Symbiotics. And we are really trying to increase our lending to up to $1 billion US, increase whereas in the previous fund, we were able to lend out about 236,000 loans. Here we want to really change that to 2.5 million. So when you invest in housing, you actually, this is an area of development that we call a development aggregator. It's you grow the impact, because by investing in housing, you invest in livelihoods, because many of these low-income households operate their businesses from these premises. You invest in educational outcomes. 75% of our borrowers in Microbuild 1 were female, and 83% of them were from the rural backgrounds. And that's how you also invest in gender outcomes. When we pair these loans for energy efficiency, do product development based on loan consumer needs, we actually improve climate resilience and adoption of climate action at the grassroots level. So in short, housing is an impact aggregator, and it impacts several of the SGDs, including affordable housing, poverty reduction, and education and gender outcomes. So thank you so much for listening to the presentation.
Thank you, Saba. Microbuild is a clear example of how people invest and own their future, both literally and figuratively. So at this point, we've reflected on our collective experience, and we propose the following recommendations for both the CSOs and for ADB. We'd like Mary Ann to survive without Western grants, civil society organizations need to change how they think and how they work. We'll ask Mary Ann to explain why local partnerships are key.
Thank you, Heidi. Pinky, sorry. Local partnerships are key because with one, you cannot do anything, but you have to have someone at the back of you or someone beside you to combat and fill up gaps that are needed in society. So, as I've said earlier, for myself, I see that partnership is very much needed in spaces where, especially in civic spaces, where we find very hard to reach out for government services. Actually, we are on platforms where we right wrongs and our voices are not heard by the government. So it's very much needed when we look into, when we embed local and indigenous leadership with multi-sectoral sector collaborations and core governance structures of the organizations, we see that we can drive forward and reach goals that are, and reach targets that are needed to be reached in due time. So yeah, partnership and solidarity is needed very much as we work together to reach all these goals. Thank you.
Thank you. We also recommend that we build sustainable financial resilience now among our CSOs. Saba?
Yeah, so, as we all know that, with the current situation in the world, with the rising crisis, both in terms of war and rising and the inflation that is going to cause, just grant funding is declining. More and more organizations are looking for how they could revolve their investment and how they can also achieve a return on that. What it means for the sector is move towards blended finance capital for development, and also increases the accountability and the transparency in the development finance systems. Because once you start treating philanthropic money as investments, then you are accountable to your donors for how it has been spent. You're forced to actually look for more efficient ways, build in efficiencies, reduce wastage, and also the speed of action, which, we would all agree how the various crises, whether it is for climate action or for housing, there's an urgent need for action on these areas. And that's why, in order to build sustainable funding sources for all the great work that various civil organizations put up, there is this specific need that more and more of these initiatives should be blended, should be financed through blended finance instruments with a clear target of impact and evaluation.
Thank you. Well, the next recommendation, I think I'm in a better position to explain on. We all have to learn. We all have to professionalize our organizations. Aside from grants and gifts and contributions, really build our capacity as organizations to earn, to access commercial capital, even impact investing or even other forms of funding for large scale projects. So the objective also is to redirect from giving to people, but more to giving to our organization, so that there's more impact, there's more scale. Yeah. And then another recommendation is to leverage technology and evidence and drive digital transformation, both in all aspects of our organizations. So professionalizing in resource management, data collection, communications. We have to engage more people to support our work, and specifically also for fundraising. Okay. Then we have recommendations that we bravely propose to the ADB. The first is to institutionalize Indigenous and local leadership that embed Indigenous knowledge and local expertise into the core of the ADB CSO framework. Mary Ann?
As I've said earlier in my speech, Indigenous knowledge is intergenerational knowledge. It's been shared from generation to generation, and we have the capacity to preserve and conserve food security during droughts, during floods, during natural disasters. And in that mentality, we can use that as most small island developed nations and across the Asia Pacific, we are all interact with each other. We live in communities where we mobilize and share ideas, share knowledge. We help each other in our little ways. So when you talk about institutionalized Indigenous and local leadership that embedded in, Indigenous knowledge and local expertise into the core of ADB CSO framework, you're looking at putting civil societies who are at the front line, Indigenous communities most affected by climate change and most affected by the necessities of life like clean water, sanitation, food security, into a framework where we can be inclusive in partnering and into policy decision making where funding can reach Indigenous-led organizations so that we meet the 2030 strategies that ADB has. And we move forward from there. Thank you.
Our second recommendation is to build local financial independence by layering ADB funds with local money. Saba.
Yeah, so when we engage with local lending practices, what it does is, it reduces the element of hedging for funds, because if you're investing just in dollars, naturally every investment has to build in a hedging mechanism, which what it does is makes the end financing more costlier for the beneficiaries that you're trying to support and which are in need for cheaper funds. Local denominated funds and local currency lending supports that kind of process where you can actually target the low-income households and other beneficiaries for that.
Right. Our third recommendation is to fund innovation through technical assistance windows and mobilization facilities to provide soft loans and startup capital for CSOs.
Can I
Yes, of
interject? And I think I like to hear from the audience some of the points in this discussion. So I'm going to go ahead and, as ADB, give some reflection, and then I would like to hear from the audience some of the thinking behind this, because the time for free money is over. Let me put it straight. Money comes in, do good thing, and then money goes out. It doesn't come back. Ideally, money comes in, do good thing, money comes back, and then the cycle can continue to do good things. I think civil society need to think, how can I be sustainable financially? How can I prepare myself to be governance, good accountability, good transparency, all the things that we are advocating for other institutions to be should be reflected within civil society itself, right? So when I worked with civil society many years ago, we had something called the GPP, the Civil Society Good Practice. And actually, we have an accreditation system where civil society had to go through all the good governance accreditation. And once they went through that, that means they have the accounting system, the governance system, and all that. It's easier for them to access financing, whether it is from donors or from fundraising, because when you fundraise, the public has to trust you, right? And you have to show that you're using the money wisely, accountably, and that's so important. And I think in this day and age, there are some civil society who are doing really good things. I recently talked to an NGO called ACTED. I think they work in the region, and they build capacity of civil society to be able to have all those systems and structures in place so that they then can access the market to borrow, and then they borrow from the market to actually finance some of their work. And they had also designed a model. Each institution look at how they can bring back resources into their operations, right? So using the market mechanism to finance that. And I think there's some really creative things going on in the Philippines and the UK, where there are banks that are lending out to charities and to civil society. So I'm really interested in this area. We actually have a young intern coming in June to work with NGOC to look at the transition of civil society to social enterprises. And what is that transition pathway, and how can civil society start to evolve into that self-sustaining model? So I think this is a really inflection point for us, to use a word from another colleague in another bank. He said this is an inflection point. Civil society need to reflect on this, and how can banks and MDB help? I really appreciate the Habitat for Humanity model. I think we need to talk more, and maybe the discussion should be, how can we help you to scale up some of the great work that you're doing for the communities, and the work you're doing in the communities, like the earlier session where Indigenous people had all these amazing ideas about Indigenous people-led development. What does that look like? Can MDB finance Indigenous people-led development?
Yeah.
Right? I think there are lending in some of the bigger countries. ADB lend to local authorities and local provincial towns and things like that. But if there are Indigenous groups that are of their own, have their own ideas, maybe there's a way for private sector financing or some kind of government guarantee. So I think we got to think creatively about financing communities and financing for housing. So I really appreciate this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Heidi. Any questions from?
Should get,
Sure.
yeah.
Sure.
So there's two here.
Hi, I'm Arman from Armavir Development Center, and with ADB, we have done community-led solutions for mitigating COVID-19 impact. It was a good practice in terms of engaging community-based organizations in these processes. But to reflect on some of the questions that and recommendations were addressed, in fact, these are issues that we as a community-based organization are also looking in terms of sustainability. And one example from Armenia was that we transferred the state granting system into transparent and open place in order to sustain our childcare services, which we established with Save the Children, and then we wanted to keep it after the project. So the whole system now in Armenia, all the government agencies to delegate social services is done through open competitive basis. But it only allows us to continue already established projects instead of going into other solutions, right? So yes, the engaging state is one example. Then another example, the social enterprise. We try to do social enterprise operation as well, but the business environment in some of our countries is not as strong, and it doesn't bring the profit. It maybe reduces our operational cost, but again, if we want to do more work and we want to be creative and go into solutions, it's limiting. So my question to Heidi and to ADB, our vision of sustainability is to establish local endowment funds. And ADB is good in these aspects, how to invest and how to have this endowment coming, because that would give this flexibility of keeping the money and only spending the things. So is this something ADB would be open working on with community-led organizations to look into how we can establish local endowment funds to support CSOs instead of investing money over the time, but creating these funds that will be sustainable? Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Mirshed Aslanov. I'm a CEO and founder of an independent think tank in Uzbekistan, Center for Progressive Reforms. I would like to share our experience, how we are managing and coping with ensuring the financial sustainability of our enterprise. First of all, I look at our think tank as an organization that can provide services. So what we do research, we do implement different projects, we do different activities, we conduct surveys, we even have our media hub where we even organize podcasts and also produce documentaries. For example, last year, one of our documentaries attended the Cannes Festival. So we have lots and lots of projects that we're working on, and we see that there are so many opportunities, I believe, in any other countries, but especially in Uzbekistan, because there are lots of reforms are going on in the country in each and every sector. So each and every sector, be it governmental organization or businesses, they need advice, they need partners, they need partnerships, because they need to explain what they are doing and why they are doing. And they need to, of course, assess different risks. So what we do environmental impact assessment, we do social impact assessment, we do economic impact assessment. Our experts, for example, I'm very much proud that I believe they are much better than ADB's experts here in Tashkent. Because our experts, for example, can do regulatory impact assessment. They can assess, for example, how certain regulation, which is a shock, of course, for any organization, will impact, for example, interests of the government, interests of the businesses, now and within the next 5 years, using different, for example, econometric tools and other kind of methods of analysis. So I want to say is that if you ask me what's the biggest secret, I can tell it's a capacity. So my recommendation, besides all of those, I think you should also focus on saying that, I believe it's pertinent to everyone here, is to focus on your capacity. If you are capable to provide, there will be always demand for so many things in each and every field. So for example, in Uzbekistan, as you said, the local support, for example, from the government is increasing. This year, government is providing over $160 million to civil society organizations. But there are different businesses. For example, we work closely with big and small and medium businesses. They also need They also need assistance, actually, partnerships as well. So we have a huge pipeline. My challenge now is not looking for money, but actually allocating our capacity, because there are so many opportunities, so many projects nowadays. So I believe my input would be focus on your capacities, focus on your skills, and focus on people and talents. This is the key for your future success. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Petra Hobel with Bankwatch. Thanks a lot for all of your amazing presentation and the work. Before here, I spent 2 sessions up the hill. There was billions juggled, gigawatts and things like that. But what I missed there, those were people. And I think as this was really refreshing to hear presentations which do care about people. So I really would like to thank you for that. I have one question for you, because you're working on the housing. I'm a bit more interested in the energy. Whether you're thinking about the program of the working with them on the decentralized renewables, particularly photovoltaics, which now prices are going down, which are both important for can reducing the costs for the running, particularly if people have businesses, but also they are important for the education, etc., etc.
No, thank you for that question. Actually, we are. So our process is that when we work with a microfinance institution, we see how the loans are currently being utilized. One example I have is from Bosnia, where we worked with a microfinance institution, and we saw that 46% of their loans were going towards energy transition. So we helped them design a specific loan for that energy transition journey of their clients. And then once you do that, you can also partner with manufacturers. And as you very rightly say, the prices are going down. There are much better deals and pricing that we can structure for our low-income households. Any amount of money that they save, which is on their energy costs, eventually goes back to either their businesses or food on the table or education of their children. So very much so, we are very interested and keenly watching this space. In our follow-on fund, we have a 20% dedicated towards climate adaptation and energy efficient loans.
Thank you. Any more questions from?
I think to address Armin's point
Yeah.
on endowment,
Yeah.
there's actually some civil society, the bigger international NGOs, they're very good at setting up endowment. I think I once attended a session with Conservation International where they were able to get like one big donation and they used it to put it in an investment fund, and then the interest of the investment fund, they use it for their projects. So there are ways to set it up, and I'm not a financial expert, but yeah, there are, if you talk to maybe Habitat for Humanity has the expertise, but setting up a system where, you know, you continue to finance your work. I think in South Asia and some parts in Southeast Asia, they have what they call community savings fund, where the community starts saving money together. And then when they get to a certain level, they create their own kind of like community banking. And it's amazing what they can do with the money from the community banking. And it's not a lot of money, but it's enough to do works in the community, and it continues to grow. And as it gets to a certain level, then they have enough to invest into bigger areas. So this is something that I think learning on investing what little you have and how to do that. And when you do fundraises, you can also think of some way to like match make, right?
Yes.
So if you say, if I fundraise, I get $1, then get another company to say, well, I will give you $1 for every dollar you earn, or something like that, right? Some creative ways. But I really appreciate the colleague talking about capacity, the need to serve and the capacity to serve. And I think that capacity sometimes is missing. So I really appreciate our colleague from Papua New Guinea who said, this is an opportunity to get her voice and to be heard, to talk. So in a way, coming to forums like this, build your capacity to engage in this kind of level. So I'm really pleased that at this annual meeting, we have so many Indigenous community voices. So I think to hear the voices and to build capacity of people who may not have the opportunity to speak, you know, to other colleagues, other civil society, and connecting you with others here. I hope you take the opportunity to connect with each others and maybe use the opportunities, and you can share your opportunities with other colleagues who then can collaborate with you to meet those needs of whether government needs or private sector needs, you know. I think civil society can play many roles. So thank you for that.
Thank you. I have some questions. No? Yes, go ahead, ma'am.
Hi, this is Shen, and I'm from Total Impact Capital, which is based in Washington, D.C. And I really appreciate this really great panel about innovative financing, blended financing, because that's exactly where our firm specializing. And our portfolio is usually more on Africa, Latin America, where this kind of conversation has been around for quite some time, especially after the end of the era of the free money, right? So this is the thing that we have been thinking a lot, and I want to share kind of two examples where we have been working around the globe. One thing is in Africa and really trying to harnessing the carbon credits to support the clean cooking, clean water. And now it's really, really great in the sense that the government, because the kind of CORSIA voluntary trying to migrate from certain voluntary market to a much more upscale CORSIA market, and that really required the government support to come in and really to also drive the agenda, the objective for the national agenda. So I think that's a very powerful, one of the things in terms of thinking about innovative financing, and so as to really migrate the traditional grant-based project to really this financial sustainable model. And one of the things I think that's really kind of speak to several things like several people have been mentioned is the partnership capacity, right? So one of the projects we work in Central America is providing clean water. In the sense, it's really community-led in the sense that they identify where's the gap, where's the infrastructure, with the technical support from CRS, Catalytic Relief Service. And that's where we're thinking about how to really align the IDB, where's the MDB coming in money, and also private sector impact investment coming in, and with our help service on the structuring side management, and also with this like continuous support on the technical support for the community. So I think this is like really two examples that we have been working on, thinking about innovative financing, blended finance, so as to make like global development needs more sustainable. From the financial perspective. But I guess just one thing I'm also curious about panel's idea over here, because when we're thinking about institution alignment, all the partnership coming together, all stakeholder pitching in with your capacity, your efforts, your money, your like energy, expertise, so and so. What we're actually seeing a gap over here is blended finance a lot of time. What we are actually still like expecting is NDB playing this like critical role so as to de-risk, right? I think that de-risk component is very catalytic for a lot of other private sector, even the commercial money to come in so that they also can get to mitigate that gap in terms of a perceived risk, right? But when I having the conversation with like GCF, Green Climate Fund, or even a lot of NDB player, I understand their capacity constraint, just given that you guys are more operate on top down, much broader scale, like hundreds of millions or even billions of the scale in terms of that sense. So how do you mitigate in that sense in terms of you do have to deploy money at scale, but at the same time really to support those like more grassroots, smaller scale, community-led project? Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Hi, just briefly, I'm Sari Worcester, ex-ADB staff. Just wanted to, what Heidi mentions and the colleagues from Uzbekistan related to capacity and also not depends on, finance from outside, or because, money is not so much in development at the moment, even though in some countries, yes. But I just wanted to say, I'm from West Sumatra, a Minang culture where we are matrilineals. Property is given to the women to protect the women. So in West Sumatra, for 40 years, since 40 years until now, we collect some amount for every individual West Sumatra and everywhere they are in the world. They send money home. That can be used for anything, for house, for water, for education. So for 40 years, can you imagine? You can give as small as $1 or as much as, $1,000 whatsoever. But there are a little bit flip back because the community is very good. They're very generous, but then it makes the government a bit lazy. So if there is anything happen, they just wait. Oh yeah, people will do it anyway. So it's a lot of happening in West Sumatra or Aceh or anywhere because people are so compassionate, but also they're good because they are trust. They do it, and the government lay back a little bit. So maybe we should balance it. But the questions, perhaps to my colleagues, and I forgot already whether we have any knowledge product that's, pick up all this good practice and lessons from, the capacity and not dependency on finance and how to build that. So it's sustained. Thank you so much.
Right, I agree. I think Heidi and I were talking about it, and Roselle and I were talking about it, how we can harness all of these good examples or best practices and see how they apply to the other maybe smaller organizations as models. No, we have a question online. For ADB, would you have capacity building funds for CSOs that so they can access help in professionalizing fundraising and have better systems to handle large-scale funding?
There may be a colleague there with her hand up, but
Yes, ma'am.
I can share a bit. there's a colleague of ours who works in accounting, and she was saying, would civil society be interested in learning about, managing accounts and, all this capacity building? So we're in the discussion on, is it the role for ADB to do that training, or is it the role for other civil society who already has that experience to do that work, right? I think a lot of it is partnering with other civil society and then working closely. I think sometimes we can provide the space, or we provide something, and then the civil society provide the capacity. So it's like making stone soup. Everybody bring a little bit of something.
Together, yeah.
So we can provide the space, other can provide the expertise. I really appreciate the colleague from the investment groups in the back sitting there from Washington area, from the US, talking about, investment. She has the investment skills, so maybe you all can tap into her investment skill, blended finance, all this creative way to do financing. But yes, ADB private sector colleagues do a lot of this, what they call mitigating, I guess, being the first one to go in to invest in something, and then, having others follow because you're crowding in, they call it crowding in investments. So ADB does do that, but ADB does that on a really large scale, right? We do finance financial institution. We do give finance to financial institution, and they in turn lend out to MSME and small microfinance and all that. Because ADB doesn't do the small microfinance level, we do lend out to other financial institution who then do that work. I just found out recently, ASA Philippines, ASA Philippines has actually a big loan from ADB, and then they lend out to women and women entrepreneurs. And, so I think it's great to see that there are a lot of partners already with ADB to deliver and work with that. I think more donors are also doing this, where they leverage their financing with other financing to access to, like, to address climate and environmental changes.
Right.
Just to add to your comment, Heidi, ASA Philippines, it's one of the largest microfinance institutions in the Philippines. It controls about 54% of the market share, and they also have a robust housing loan portfolio, and 100% of their clients are females. So, the investment or the working capital line that ADB provides them enables them to match their funding, because usually MFIs and other financial institutions that serve the informal market, what their biggest challenge is maturity mismatch of funding. Many are able to mobilize savings, but those savings tenure is shorter and they cannot lend long term. And that causes them difficulties for their financial sustainability. So any working capital line which is between 3 to 4 years, that mitigates immediately their financial constraint for onward lending to the informal market. So basically, we very humbly serve the poorest of the poor and the informal segment, but our solutions have to be very well structured and extra cautious so that, whatever we are able to provide is sustainable and long-term.
Right. We have a question. Yes, ma'am.
Спасибо. Нарбекова Наталья, женский молодежный центр Тумарис, Новоийской области. Как мы знаем, кто не знает, Новоийская область расположена в пустыне Кызылкума. На протяжении 3 дней я присутствую благодаря форуму, присутствую, слышу, вижу всю информацию. И я благодарю Аллаха, что что мы живем в Новом Узбекистане. У нас то, что вы сказали, выполнение ЦУРа, 1, 6, 7, это у нас все равно есть частные предприниматели, которые сами стараются помогать. Даже дома, у кого нет жилья, они даже дома предоставляют. Я гражданское общество, и нас обучали онлайном именно методу краудфандинга. Это у нас тоже работает. То, что вы говорили, хорошо, я согласна, что мы от АБР сможем какие-то другие программы финансирования или же гражданское общество обучать этим проектам по грантам, или такие крупные, чтобы на социальные проекты были. Но у нас все равно, оказывается, у нас идет то, что мы все равно хотя бы по банку сможем, если мы хотим, чтобы с ними вместе работать, но у нас все равно вот это идет. Я вот этому очень рада. Огромное спасибо, спасибо нашему президенту, нашему правительству. И вам тоже огромное спасибо.
Thank you.
Все.
Can we ask her? Yes, can you help translate? Sorry.
Yeah, the lady is from Navai region of Uzbekistan.
Right.
There's a desert called Kizilkum.
Right.
So she has an NGO there. She is a part of civil society. She's saying that she's very much happy that so many things are going on in the country that is allowing her actually to develop her organization. For example, she has recently undergone capacity building on crowdfunding. So that's allowing her actually to do what they want to do. So they express appreciation to ADB to actually talk about, share their ideas, how they can improve their financial situation, or maybe provide some tools from ADB to get some funds. But she's saying that here she's already doing effectively what she's already doing. She thanked the government and ADB for all the assistance.
Thank you.
Yeah. That's hello.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Yes.
I have a colleague, my colleague Rangina is actually from the region. So I will connect you with my colleague Rangina and maybe follow up. We're planning on the 27th of May to do an online session on understanding how to access procurement with ADB. And we're going to get Russian translation. So we will have translation. It will be online. So we will try to do more events with translation. It's I know the language barrier is there. So that's why my colleague Rangina will be, the focal here will be in touch with you. I will get your information after. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am. I understood that. Maybe one more comment from our partners. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead, Molly.
Thank you so much for all of your advice and presentations. It's great to hear all of the different examples. I'm Molly with Youth for Road Safety, and a lot of our work, and I assume some of our fellow CSOs in the room, we know that there are tangible and profitable results from the projects, but they won't happen soon. And in fact, there are often long time horizons. In my work with transport and urban development, you often don't get profitable results for at least 15 years, usually closer to 25. So when we sell ourselves like a social enterprise, we know the profit will come and you will save costs over the long run with your healthcare systems and your infrastructure costs. But governments are not that interested in the 25-year time horizon. So I'm curious for the panel or for anyone else in the room, if you have advice not only about the profit argument, but about short-term and mid-term selling points as far as explaining your value as a social enterprise.
So if I can take that question. So like, if you look at, when we started out conceptualizing the microbuild fund, one of the challenges was what should be the term of the fund. And we eventually settled at a 10-year term, and which in investment horizon, that is long term. For development sector, slightly medium term, but for investment, they're clearly a long-term investment. But the reason for that is because the problem that we are trying to solve is not just interest or the payback, return on investment that you're going to get. There is a lot of perceptual barriers that we were trying to address through this initiative. So I think how clearly you communicate your problem statement, the problem that you're trying to address. And now increasingly, as there is about 15 years ago, the investment was pretty much ROE, what is going to be my return on equity, and how soon do I get it back? And the benchmark would be that, like, if I invest in any regular bond, this is what I'm getting. But now the investment horizon has also changed, and there is a lot more, as the people who used to be just in giving are looking at giving for impact with a return so that they can revolve that same fund for future better work. So that is your target market. Where you have to be very clear is who are you asking for impact investment so that your donor selection is there. So you cannot be somebody who is looking for very quick short-term returns. So there's going to pretty much be the philanthropic families and the foundation money that you're targeting. And then it is like how clearly you are articulating your value add for that investment. How, whether it is green impact that you're providing, whether it is gender impact, that has to be very clear, and over what horizon. And what really adds to the investors' confidence is that what are some of the monitoring and evaluations that you are putting yourself through. So like lending is probably the second oldest profession in the world. I would not go to the first one. And the fundamentals have not changed. We are solving innovative problems, but the mechanism of lending and gaining interest are pretty much the same. The values and that varies. The magnitude of interest would vary in philanthropic returns or commercial returns, but high risk will give high return, lower risk will give lower return. Those fundamentals will stay the same. And that's what you have to really understand those and then work on defining your donor segment, your value add, and then your end beneficiaries.
If I also may add, I think it also depends on the design, the phasing of your project, and what milestones can be achieved to convince, to illustrate that there's impact or there's some small quick wins at each milestone point. And that will probably give your donor more confidence to support you over the longer term. Okay, maybe one last, any more questions? We have a comment from our friends online. It also takes capital and skill to delve into innovative financing. How can the private sector help CSOs be able to explore innovative financing so that they can use it to fund their work? I'm sorry, he was anonymous, but I would really want to know. So we can all send him, letters to set up meetings, no? But true, how can the private sector help CSOs? So anybody want to suggest? Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much for this presentation and meeting, very important. I only have one request from vulnerable groups, from minority groups, from Kyrgyzstan. My name is Tolikan, I represent Berlin, Kyrgyzstan. And one is a recommendation should be vulnerable groups, national minority should access information about all this project or new ideas through their own language because they don't understand the English. And that's why I think it's very important localization of these good ideas. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Ms. Heidi.
I think there's quite a lot of private sector working with civil society already. When I was in civil society, my job was actually hosting donors and fundraising and all this. So quite a lot of companies has corporate social responsibility, and they do give to civil society. But there are new kind of investment and collaboration now with civil society. I recently met a group called Catalyst Now. And they actually have a few banks behind them that actually, if you're part of the Catalyst Now network, you get capacity building, you get all the networking and the training. And when you are doing your innovation and you reach a certain level, you may even get investors who's interested in what you're doing, and the investor then would invest in you. So there's a lot of these innovation hub or innovation kind of things that But I think it tends to happen around the AI and the digital sector, right? But I think education and health and some of the impact investments areas also are very important to private sector. So we're seeing private sector investing in health, civil society, because they actually want to identify the next big thing. So I think a lot of private sector are looking for the next big thing so that they can, so they're looking into the civil society sector and see how they can support. So I think off-grid electricity and renewable energy and some of those are the areas that private sector invests a lot in as well.
Technology also, the use of
Technology.
technology to help. Yes. Yes.
I'll just add a little bit about that. Actually, as I was advocating at the same time, doing self-sustainable projects in rural areas, that's where I was noticed by Global Green Growth Institute, Triple GI. It's a Korean-based organization which is partnering with most of the governments in the Pacific. And through the Department of Australia and DFED Fund, they established a mechanism that assisted local Indigenous people using our Indigenous knowledge into doing profit at the same time looking after people and planet. Because without the other P, we were focusing on the people and planet for that long. And then this initiative created a space for us that filled the funding gap. And then, sometimes we face struggles in raising funds and, trying to find sponsors and donors. So the Triple GI mechanisms, which is used now in Papua New Guinea, in my country, is the incubator, Greenpreneur Incubators Program, which is a good platform, which is giving us innovators space to adapt to climate resilience projects where we do innovative technologies and skills in rural areas, especially the areas which are affected by climate change. And it's a good platform right now, as my friend has said, that one of the private sectors recognized us into doing green businesses in ecotourism, integrating farming, agroforestation, poultry, agriculture, and most of the Indigenous-led programs that we are doing now in the Pacific. Thank you.
Thank you, Marianne. Well, at this point, we're out of time. Would anybody want to, maybe Sava? Okay. So our collective message, just a second, here pala. Okay, our collective message is by integrating, it's more about partnerships, and building our own capacity as organizations, to evolve ourselves, into bigger projects, The message would be, let's integrate the unique strengths of each of the sectors, whether it's government, whether it's our own civil society with private sector, and most importantly, the community. The scale and authority of government might be able to help, especially with ADB and also ADB. Partnerships can move beyond isolated projects. This collective approach unlocks local capital and builds resilient ecosystems that ensure development is both inclusive and market shaping. We believe that we, the ADB, government and private sector, civil society and local communities all have the same aim: to improve the lives of the people we serve. So this commitment needs really a shift, a paradigm shift for all of us, and a readiness to dig into it and to do the work. So thank you for joining us at today's session. We hope that we are able to at least give you some ideas on how community-led projects can build, and we can build community-led projects together. Thank you.